Sekeres Price for Thursday, September 12th, 2024. Coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're heading to a game downtown, make a staycation out of it. Book your stay at the Wall Center. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout date supply based on availability. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting. Big show coming up. Blake, we have hockey players in Canucks jerseys on a sheet of ice, skating in lines.
And dare I say, Matthew, I will go out on this limb. There are players taking part in the practice today, coached by Vancouver Canucks affiliated coaches. There are players on that ice that will play for the Vancouver Canucks this season.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know who they are, but I will venture to say that
I think Archie Baines.
He probably plays a game.
I would think Atu Ratu.
That's a bit of a hot take. I hope that part of me hopes that you're right, that he's earned that right to be up there, but we'll see.
And it brings us to our poll question. If the Canucks are having another good season, should they be willing to trade top prospects Jonathan Lekramaki and or Tom Wielander? What says you, Price?
Wow. If you're old enough to remember 2010 through 2012 and really remember the nuanced discussions that we had at that time, you will remember that we went over do you have to just say, to hell with the future, it's on right now. This is your window. Go get it.
Trade Corey Schneider. Trade Cody Hodgson. Do whatever you can to make the best 18.
And there are two schools of thought on this.
And goaltender you can trot out.
I will listen to the guy who pounds his fist on the desk and says, yes, you only get a chance every once in a while to win the cup. You do everything you can. I can hear that. I also have Frank Saravalli's voice in my head. Nope, you owe it to yourself to compete at the highest level for as long as you can, because some things will just go against you. You're gonna be in your prime window.
Take as many knocks on the door as you can.
You're gonna be in your prime window, and two of your stars are gonna get injuries just from bad luck, and that window year is gone. So don't pen yourself into just 2 or 3 years of going for it when you want to be going for 5 or 6.
This is the Carolina model.
Yeah.
The Tom Dundon model.
They've been in it for a while. They show no signs of leaving it, per se.
Maybe so you voted yes or you voted no? You haven't voted yet.
I think you have to be open to it. I'm willing to be open to it.
It says willing. Yes. It doesn't say
will they, should they.
Do they have to?
Yeah. I certainly listen. They're not untouchable. If that answers.
Well, because they're very good prospects. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but they're not of the Macklin Celebrini level. They're not of the Rasmus Dahlin level.
Should they be willing? With that wording, yes.
Are they even of the Mitchkoff, Will Smith level to shout a couple of rookies this year that will get some Calder buzz and talk here in the preseason?
Using our wording, should they be willing? They should be willing. Yes.
Yeah. It's a decisive yes from me. And here's why. Remember we used to have Gilman on Wednesdays, and he had the great line, there are two types of teams in the NHL. Those trying to get pregnant and those trying to have a baby. The Canucks are pregnant. They're trying to have a baby.
Yeah.
Being a Stanley Cup. You saw firsthand last year in the 7-game series against Edmonton what you're up against, right? That's your derby. You need to do everything you can to get through Edmonton, and then likely Dallas or Colorado or someone like that awaits in the Western Final if you're engaged in divisional playoff. And, of course, if you're a top 3 team, you will be in divisional playoff. You have all your best players in their prime. Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, Thatcher Demko, Brock Besser, JT Miller, Philip Hronik. You have 2 more years contractually with Demko. You have 3 more years contractually with Quinn Hughes. How much better is JT Miller getting at age 31? Right?
Not getting better.
And then, of course, the uncertainty with Demko about how long he's going to be able to ride in the NHL if this is going to be a persistent knee issue.
Well, Matt, you can even extend that to the playoffs. So let's say the Canucks successfully get Thatcher Demko to game 1 of the playoffs healthy, quote unquote healthy. Playoffs a grind. Like, do you have confidence that Thatcher Demko can play with the rigors of playoff hockey and make it to the end of the playoffs, whenever that might be?
Frankly, through 2 management groups here who have robbed the future to pay the present, and both are guilty of it, if you want to use that word, down the road's going to be pretty grisly anyways, I think.
Just in terms of the cupboard not being exactly stocked right now.
Yeah, I mean, they have some depth. We've talked about this. But as the EPDs matriculate, first of all, none of them are sure bets at this stage.
They're not all going to hit.
And then, what you're hopeful of is that they can come in and play the support roles, right? Like Lekkerimäki and Wielander, maybe EPD and Sheloves, if you still consider him a prospect, would be sort of the long-term future core.
Sure.
So, look, we had this discussion last year, and there was different times, and I think at the end of the day, the Canucks were a little bit caught here. I think they had 1 foot in column A, 1 foot in column B. Are you all in or are you not all in? There's no equivocated all in. You're either all in or you're not. And last year, they looked all in when they made the Lindholm and Zadorov deals, and then they demurred at the trade deadline. They weren't willing, and Alvin mentioned this, they weren't willing to pay the prospect or draft pick capital to go on out and get the Gensel, not to mention the fact they were up against a cap space barrier as well.
And given the playoff drought, I can understand that reticence.
Right. You were going to the playoffs anyways. You knew that. You pretty much knew it was a successful season by December.
Yeah.
This year, there's expectation. And it is a carpe diem season for the Vancouver Canucks because, this confluence of factors this year with all these players in their primes, it's go time. Bottom line. So I voted yes. I'm really surprised that you mentioned this to me too, as we were prepping for the show. I'm really surprised that voters on this poll are where they are. I mean, as we sit here and talk about it, we're 800 votes into this, and 77% are saying no.
Yeah. And I'm not going to tell those no voters that they're wrong.
You can construct an argument for no. Of that, there is no doubt. I just think you can construct a better argument for yes.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that there is some wisdom to, no, we're not trading those 2 guys. Well, we might trade the first round pick. We're certainly willing to peel seconds. And you see how much better you can get with that stock as opposed to trading away these guys.
I mean, they have their first round pick for next season.
Yeah.
Right. They have do they have their second round pick for next season? I don't have it right in front of me. Yes, they do. They have their first and second round pick for each of the next 2 years. They're missing a second in 2027. If you told me that in lieu of Lekkerimäki or Tom Wielander, that you were going to peel multiple of these first and second round picks over the next couple of years to go get the top 4 right shot defensemen, fair enough. And if that drives you to a no vote on the poll, I'm with you. Yeah, fair enough. I just think in some cases you will have potential trading partners who aren't necessarily going to want a future pick because they're looking at it as a player who's 3-4 years away, whatever the case may be. Whereas Lekkerimäki and Wielander may very well dip toes in the NHL this year, may very well be NHLers next season.
And we should make it clear, and we didn't stipulate one way or the other on a possible trade. In my own reading of the poll question, that's not for a rental. Like, wouldn't entertain Wielander or Lekkerimäki for a rental.
Well, unless the rental is someone like Sidney Crosby.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I think
more on him in a second.
And to your point about what you get is, if you're trading away Lekkerimäki for a signed player, probably a young to middle-aged at worst defenseman, most probably, in my mind at least. The acquiring team doesn't really want to pick, because if they're willing to trade you a 26-year-old defenseman or something like that, they're probably not in dire straits right now. They probably are sculpting things a la the Roenick trade. They are probably tweaking things here or there to put themselves. They probably want somebody that's going to help them soon, and Lekkerimäki is going to help them a lot sooner than a first round pick. So that's why we didn't put the first round pick. It's going to be a middling first round pick at worst. At best, it's a 25th overall pick or something.
Yeah, I mean, unless the season goes to pot, yes.
So that's not going to have the same cachet as it once had for the Vancouver Canucks.
Let's get to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, neighborhood brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits and Foolish Winery. A motivated captain, Quinn Hughes. He's still recriminating the playoff series loss to the Edmonton Oilers and what more he could have done against Edmonton. Let's take a listen. This is Hughes speaking to our Jeff Patterson and others earlier this week at the Jake Milford about what he learned last season.
I mean, I played 98 games last year. I didn't miss a game. I think that was I have the format of like what I need to be successful, how you need to sleep and eat and train, and I have the blueprint, and now I just got to continue to do it and then try to build on my game, what I can do better. Like I said in the playoffs, it would have been nice to, I didn't hate my game. I liked my game, but it would have been nice to, score a goal or change the direction of a game when needed to, and that's something that I focused on this summer, and we'll see if I can do it this year.
And what you're hearing there is that is a fully made NHL man and star, right? That part achieved. You have realized your potential and become what everybody thought you would become when you were taken high in that first round. But now he's looking to not just be an NHL, now he's looking to be an even better player, a great player, a legendary player. And where is that achieved? That's achieved in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I love the fact that he uses the term, I didn't hate my game. He liked his game. He didn't love his game.
Yeah.
And what more can I do? And as we discussed earlier in the week, he's shooting for 20 goals. He wants to not only create more goal-scoring opportunities for himself, but finish those opportunities when they come along, and particularly in the Stanley Cup playoffs, where conversion rate on your chances is everything. Yeah, boy, I got to say,
it's never perfect, right? No playoff series is perfect. Heard people talking about the Oilers finish to the playoffs. Connor McDavid didn't have points in the last couple of games.
Yeah.
I mean, every player is going to have some regrets of if I could have done this more. And Quinn Hughes is probably looking back going, yeah, I wish I had played better. I wish I was maybe more fully healthy to be able to execute like I normally execute. All those things are true. And some of them are out of control. If you get dinged in the playoffs and you're playing at 80%, I mean, that's all you got.
Mm-hmm. And I must say, we're sitting here pretty much a year since he was named captain. And what an outstanding choice from the Vancouver Canucks. He's really come out of his shell.
Yep.
And that C has given him voice. It kind of reminds me of Henrik Sedin a little bit. Whereas, Henrik Sedin was not necessarily viewed as a go-to locker for media to get the pulse of the team or anything like that. While Marcus Naslund was here, while Roberto Luongo wore the C that one year. And then when Hank got the C, it was like a new guy. He spoke authoritatively. He spoke on behalf of the group. I mean,
we had the same worry about it too.
Yeah, no,
great
exactly.
player, but
quiet
so
guy.
quiet and all.
No.
Yeah, it
like
works.
and you're seeing the same phenomenon here with Hughes. And I gotta say, I was for Elias Pettersson getting the C, and a year later, that's a Mayor of Wrongville take. And look, I was partly for that because remember last year he needed to resign, right? We were counting down here to the potential of unrestricted free agency and losing him for nothing. So I
you wanted to use it as a tether,
as an enticement. Yeah, like here, we'll turn the team over to you. But no, they absolutely made the right call with Quinn Hughes, and quite frankly, the difference of opinion on the knee injury or tendonitis between Tocchet and Pettersson. Can you imagine if he's wearing the C right now and that kind of...
Well, on the flip side, though, we don't know what the universe looks like with him, the captain. Does he behave differently with the C on?
Fair enough.
I mean, who knows? Who knows?
But I think they recognize, like, Quinn is a hockey lifer. He's a hockey rat. He's a rink rat. He is everything. And he already overcomes because he's so slight, right? That he's already fought through so much that would hold your typical hockey player back and not allow them to get to the NHL, get to being a top player, get to winning a Norris Trophy. He's overcome a lot to get to this.
Yeah. I mean, and
he
continues to prove. I'm sure there are still doubters out there, even with him hoisting a Norris Trophy. So, you should tell Yellow Dog Playdead IPAs, the 4-packs, tall cans, on special for the month of September. Look for it on sale at private and government liquor stores. Those will be crushed this weekend.
Oh boy,
in Penticton.
You be careful now. That's a higher alcohol content on the Playdeads.
We're going to start a little bit earlier on Saturday, though. We'll be safe.
Sunday,
pardon me.
Sunday. We mentioned this earlier in the week. Let's play the clip now because Hughes is asked, again, this is another sign for me, a very mature answer, a leader's answer. He gets asked about repeating as the Norris Trophy winner. Here's what he has to say.
I don't think my goal is necessarily Norris. My goal is the process, and if I'm competing and playing the way and attacking the way I want to every game, good things will happen. But obviously, consistency is like the sign of a great player. And, I was reading that pamphlet at the awards, and Makar's been up for it, I think, 4 of the last 5 years or something like that. And that's consistency. So,
yeah. And that's a great model. I want that 4 out of 5 years to be nominated. But here's the thing. At the point now, got a Norris Trophy, tick that box. That's not necessarily the goal. You play as you anticipate playing, you improve as you anticipate improving, the Norrises will fall into place.
I almost think that I'm trying to put myself into his brain, and wish I had the skills of Quinn Hughes, obviously. You've got the respect now. Like if you felt like you needed to prove to people that you belonged in the league, check.
Which we were having that conversation last year, right? Dom Lecision in the rankings, and
right.
Exactly. Like, why isn't this guy getting more league-wide love? Well,
he's got it now.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. And here's the other thing.
Not that he wasn't thinking team first before that, but that's always, you've got room to think more than one thought at the same time. And I think that was probably a thought somewhere in his brain. Well, it shouldn't be anymore. And now it can be squarely on winning.
Well, and the other thing about Norris trophies is you have no control over what the rest of the defensemen in the NHL do. And we'll give you the recent example of 2 years ago. Like Cale Makar was, and still is, a top flight NHL defenseman. And then Erik Karlsson went out and scored a stupid amount of points, right? With a rebuilding San Jose team where he could basically go play rover and rack up historic totals. And they gave him the award. Okay. Makar had a damn good season. Adam Fox had a damn good season.
Yeah.
That year. Karlsson just went above and beyond on the point side of things. Okay. Give him the Norris. No big deal. Doesn't diminish the quality of other defensemen around the league.
Karlsson played with a different set of rules.
He did.
Karlsson played with it has no bearing on wins and losses, and we don't care.
We're not going to the playoffs this year anyway, so I'm going to go get fat.
Yeah,
on those goals and assists. To hell, defensive zone be damned.
Are we switching gears here?
We can, yes.
I just wanted to quickly get in a couple of comments on the poll question here
Please.
from the people.
Please.
Uncommon sense. I'd be fine with trading Lekramaki for whatever you can get. I think he's too petite to do much in the NHL. Don't usually use the word petite when describing NHL players, but well done.
He's too lithe.
Grim Studio says needing ELC contracts.
Yep.
Needing ELC contract difference makers this year and next in Lekramaki and Wheeler. Well, you're not going to get it out of those two this year,
Yep.
but your concept is correct in that going forward. Yeah, they're going to need not that, if the cap keeps going up by $5 million jumps, they're going to be saved a little bit by that anyhow, but they're going to be much better off if somebody making $1 million is giving them 25 goals, is giving them 20 minutes in Wheelander. So if they can get that going forward, you're right. They are a lot of the good teams. They do get that.
Yeah. Frankly, I'm not sure Florida had an ELC difference maker.
No, there might be an
Last
exception.
year.
Yeah.
No, the point is right. It is a lot easier to contend when you have players on ELCs playing sizable roles on your hockey club. That is given. And yeah, I mean, going all the way back to the Anaheim Ducks Cup, right? And all those young players they had on great deals, Getzlaff and Perry and Penner, and on and on it went.
Incidentally, I don't think the Oilers had an ELC difference maker or even contributor. So it's a kind of a rare head-to-head Stanley Cup where there were some trades made and some mortgages paid to get there.
The point on Lekramaki, that he's kind of a skinny guy and maybe not built for the rigors of the NHL, let alone the Stanley Cup playoffs, that, it was only last year where he began playing a little bit more in between the dots, that he's a perimeter scorer, and that the offense that he's shown in the Swedish leagues are not going to translate to the NHL. I don't think that's going to be the case. I hope for the sake of the young man and the Canucks that's not the case. But that's not an argument I'm ready to dismiss just yet. And there is a world, Blake, where his value may never be higher than right now, right? If he goes out and has a stinker in the AHL, then all of a sudden next year is draft +4 season. Still hasn't played in the NHL. Is he going to be able to cut it? So that's an opinion I can absolutely accept and an argument I can hear. Wheelander is a little different for me in terms of the nuance of the argument, but the macro point I think is also similar, and that is this kid looks every bit the smooth skating, right shot, contributor offensively, minute eater defensively. But he's not a high-end offensive defenseman.
It's okay.
Right?
You've already got two of those.
The puck skills aren't exactly otherworldly or anything like that. And if he's not bringing a ton of offense to your game or to your team, and he's not the big, mean, nasty son of a gun who, may help you further cause in the playoffs, if he settles in as a mid-pair, or perhaps doesn't even realize that potential and is more a bottom pair or a number 5, if you will, then yeah, I could also understand the argument on Wheelander. Now, he's the scarcest commodity out there, the right shot defenseman who can help you offensively. Again, that's if he hits his prospect profile. And Lekramaki has a little bit of that too, the scarce commodity of being a goal scorer. So, no, you don't want to part with either of these guys, but you have to do a very objective evaluation. If you're Jim Rutherford, Patrick Alvin, and the Canucks front office, about who these guys are now, what they look like as this season goes along, and when they could possibly help your hockey club. And when I mean help, I don't mean come on in and play like Vasily Podkolzin did in his rookie year, get stapled to the bottom 6, playing a support role. I mean, when they can help as a top 4 defenseman in Wheelander's case, as a top 6 winger and power play guy in Lekkermack.
Well, Wielander's going to come in, remember, a little bit older because he's going the college route. So let's just say he plays one more year, turns pro. Let's say they give him a full AHL year. So that means he's not making his Canucks debut until he's 26, 27, till the year 26, 27. There's only 3 guys under contract that year. 2 of them are right shot defensemen, Ian Ronick and Myers, and Hughes is the other. But you still got Hughes under contract. You don't even have to worry about him yet at that point. He's probably extended, in fact, by the time training camp starts. But that's exactly when you want Wielander dipping his toe in so that when Quinn's extension hits the following year, maybe Wielander's ready to take on more minutes and be that ELC difference maker when Quinn Hughes is making $14 million a season, which is probably the case.
You say that, Blake, but let's see what goes on here over the next couple of years, right?
Of course. You can say that with any prospect.
This is a guy whose 2 brothers play on the same team. And actually, we found out today that Luke Hughes
injured
has a shoulder injury, and he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. Tough break for a kid who was on the Calder finalist last year. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're going to do everything in your power to re-sign Quinn Hughes. And you hope that Quinn Hughes wants to sign here long-term and be a Canuck for life. But I think the next couple of years are probably going to give us more information on that.
Well, for sure. For sure. I mean, if this team wins, if this team shows that they're a juggernaut, I don't think Quinn is going anywhere.
Probably not. Probably not. Teams don't tend to players of that stature don't tend to leave good teams.
No.
Ben Kuzma reporting in the province on the Young Stars roster. We had talked about it yesterday with Dave Hall of Canucks Army. No Cole McWard, no Jet Wu. In Cole McWard's case, he's got a knock, so they're just holding him out. And Jet Wu has seen enough of the Young Stars, so they're giving him a respite from this tournament. Thomas Drance has the practice lines for the Canucks Young Stars, and Lekkermack going to line up with Atu Ratu and Archdeep Baines on a top line, so they're loading up a line. Sasson is going to play with Klimovich, at least we suspect. Mueller, the young centerman we talked about yesterday with Dave Hall, and Romani, the AHL scorer. And we'll see if he can light the lamp in Penticton. Josh Bloom going to play more on a looks like more of a checking line as a wing. Kudryavtsev and EPD as your top defense pair. Kita Hiroshi going to participate as well.
I mean, that's if those hold, and who knows if they hold, but if those hold, that's a wonderful opportunity for Lekkermack to get a couple of the seasoned guys with him. And I mean, if you're Baines and Ratu, you don't want to, people will be looking at you as the seasoned guys that have been there and done that, played AHL games aplenty. You don't want to look like an idiot, so you do want to play with some better. Like if Ratu's stuck where down with Bloom and McMillan, I mean, it's going to be harder for Ratu to look good, right? He wants to maintain his position. I don't think that Baines and Ratu have anything to really gain in this, but they might have something to lose if they really look poor against guys that they should be dominating. So I think if you're Baines and Ratu, you're pretty happy that you've got a skilled guy there, and vice versa for Lekkermack. So
as for the other participants in Young Stars, we'll start with the Winnipeg Jets because they typically bring the best roster to Young Stars. Now, part of that is a function of operating out of Winnipeg. They have to be a draft and develop organization. As you know, there are players who ask out of Winnipeg, including Rutger McGroarty, a prospect who never even touched Winnipeg this year. The player they got in return from the Pittsburgh Penguins, from McGroarty, Braden Yager, a Western Hockey League forward, he'll be there. Thomas Milich of New West and Coquitlam Minor Hockey, of course, once upon a time, Canada's World Junior Hero, gold medal in goal. He's going to be there for the Jets. In fact, tons of firepower from the Jets up in the forward ranks. Colby Barlow, first-round pick. Chaz Lucius, first-round pick. Brad Lambert, first-round pick. Nikita Chibrikov, who touched Winnipeg for a game last year. So Winnipeg's going to have a whole lot of forward punch and goal-scoring ability amongst the individuals that they're bringing to this tournament. The Oilers will have Matt Savoy, one-time first-round pick of the Buffalo Sabres, acquired in the Ryan McLeod trade this summer. He's an Edmonton kid. He's coming home, so it'll be his first go in an Oilers sweater, as well as their first-round pick from this past year, Sam O'Reilly. He's a centerman who's coming to the tournament. And then we move over to Calgary and the Flames, and former Vancouver Giant Samuel Honzek will be there, of course, a first-round pick of the Flames a couple of years ago. Their Russian first-round pick this year, Matvei Gridin, is going to be amongst the forwards. And then the defense there in Calgary is going to be the group to watch. Zane Parekh, the top 10 pick this past year. Was he top 10 or did he fall to 11 or something like that? Anyways, Calgary had a couple of first-round picks, and Parekh was a goal-scoring machine on defense last year in the OHL. And then 2 ex-Vancouver Canucks, Hunter Brestevich, of course, peddled in the Elias Lindholm deal, and Yanni Yermo, also traded to Calgary last year from the Vancouver Canucks.
I'm not sweating Yanni Yermo. I am curious about Hunter Brestevich. I'll be following his career and seeing what he does, because that was an interesting player, but many thought that was him just having a perfect season, not capable of doing it at any other level. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. So the bottom line here is that there is a lot of good young talent that's going to be in action this weekend at the South Okanagan Event Center in Penticton. Looking forward to it. Some reporting from Tyler Green, Daily Hive, our former colleague once upon a time. Canucks radio broadcasts on Sportsnet 650 will be grounded this season, and the play-by-play will be called from a studio locally in Vancouver. Alternatively, the Calgary Flames, another Rogers own radio rights holder, will be traveling this season for their radio broadcasts.
Has many leaping to conclusions of who's putting the kibosh on this. Is it from the broadcaster, Rogers? Is it from the team?
Tyler reports the decisions are locally made. And look, as somebody who loves the medium of radio, I would love if Brendan Batchelor was able to go on the road and call the games. Not only does it make it easier from a mechanical point of view as a play-by-play guy, and Blake can speak to that, but also just as a storyteller. Details make great stories. So being in buildings, raucous arenas like the United Center in the playoffs against Chicago, you remember that, right? It enhances the story. It enhances the broadcast. On the flip side of it, look, I love radio, but every game is on TV. We've got screens everywhere, and the radio broadcast is not what it used to be. I think even the most devoted listeners have to agree with that. Technology has changed the way we consume games. And really, if you're anywhere other than your car, are you listening to the radio broadcast?
It surprises me none that this has happened.
No.
I'll say this, though. If they were still welcome on the charter, would this still be happening?
That's right. Last year, Rutherford made the decision, no more media, including
The TV
the
side.
television side, Shorthouse.
Yeah. So now it's a full-on Rogers decision you'd have to think, because if they're not on the charter, you're just paying out of pocket, and I'm not surprised in the least. It's sad, but it's not surprising.
Yeah, no, I mean, like the Blue Jays radio doesn't travel.
Yeah.
And baseball and radio, go way, way back, have this romantic relationship. It's every day.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's the game that works best on radio.
It will get really sad when no play-by-play guys are traveling. And again, this is not selfishly speaking. I've got several examples of being in a stadium, from my Whitecaps experience, and seeing a guy get dinged in warm-up, and us having to tell the truck guys, so-and-so just got hurt here, just strained something. That's not happening, of course. You don't get any of that stuff when you're in a booth. So,
unless you're getting a raw TV feed.
But then you're only getting whatever that one camera showing.
Enough. That's right.
Right. So it's still a small sliver.
You're counting on the people on the ground there to,
Yeah.
Again, Good storytelling needs detail.
Yeah.
When you have people there and you have living, breathing, vibrant storytellers on the ground collecting the information, the pictures, the what have you, the sound, the what have you, it should enhance the product, the quality of the broadcast product. Anyways, too bad. Just before we leave Young Stars, a couple of stories from NHL prospect tournaments around the league here. So we talked about Akito Hirose being 25 years old and participating in the Young Stars. In his case, not so Young Stars. Did you see what the New York Islanders did? Lou Lamoriello, he's his own guy. Participating for their prospect team, 35-year-old goaltender Keith Kincaid. He's played 419 professional games. He's going to the prospect tournament. Granted, I don't have all the context here. I don't know if all of the young goaltenders in the New York Islanders system are all collegians and unable to participate or engaged in a KHL season or something like that in Europe. They may just not have had enough warm-bodied goaltenders to go to the prospect or the rookie tournament here. So a 35-year-old journeyman is going to tend net for the Isles.
I'm going to choose to believe that it's a rash of injuries.
Okay.
Because Kincaid's on a PTO, by the way.
Maybe that's it. So it's an extended look of on the PTO.
But they've got 3 players signed to minor league deals: Tristan Lennox, Henrik Tikkanen, and Jakub Skarek, who all played North American minor league hockey last year. Are they all injured? Maybe.
So it doesn't compute.
Doesn't compute. Nothing obvious rearing its head there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Here's the second story.
Lou.
Matvei Michkov, the talented young Russian winger making his North American debut with the Philadelphia Flyers. A kid that for some was right there with Connor Bedard, and think of how lofty an accolade that is, was right there with Connor Bedard in terms of the best players in the 23 draft. He's got some pizzazz. He's got some sizzle. He's an offensive dynamo. John Bailey of Philadelphia Hockey Now. Michkov just tried to do the Michigan, and Torts turned and looked at the Flyers staff on the other balcony, and they were all laughing at Torts. How is a 19-year-old Russian kid who's trying Michigan's on John Tortorella's watch strike you as a storyline for October?
I think it might have been when or Jeff was filling it. We already covered the story a little bit. Like, it is a delicious mix.
Oh,
like
it's beautiful.
And I hope to God Torts doesn't break the kid.
No, I know. It's lemon and sugar. Like, total opposites.
Does not make any sense.
I hope Torts doesn't break the kid either. Let him be himself. I mean, that high a pick, there should be some rope.
And
right?
I'm legitimately excited about Misha because he's a bit of a mystery, right? Like,
yeah, that's the other thing.
I don't think we have a real story on how good he is. It's cloak and dagger sort of video to this point. So if he's that good, God help us if Torts breaks him.
And honestly, technology has improved so many things. And in fact, we have a conversation later here with Stephen Ellis of the Daily Faceoff prospect analyst about why you're seeing fewer late round picks make it. And that is just because, we now have cameras and eyes most everywhere in the hockey playing world. And it's easier to scout and come to evaluations. That said, if there is mystery still to any young up and comers, it is usually the Russian kid, right? And it is usually the Russian kid who is in the Russian junior leagues, a junior league, or in the Russian second division, where there's just not as much of all of this. And I kind of like the mystery, the legend. Like, one of the things I love at the beginning of the NCAA basketball season is seeing the freshman high school sensation who's going to be the big NBA draft pick the next
Right.
spring, because, you know, you're just not out there watching a lot of high school basketball. They make this point in the Bo Jackson documentary. You couldn't have a Bo Jackson today because we know all these kids. There are recruiting agencies out there that are getting video and publishing to YouTube and all that. Whereas back in the day, it was, have you heard about this kid from Alabama? He threw a rock at a pig and he killed the pig.
And every once in a while, one of these guys is Kirill Kaprizov.
Yeah.
It's Pavel Bure.
Exactly.
Well,
Bure's the great example too, right? I mean, I can remember, Blake, when he and Fedorov and McGillney showed up for Russia at the World Juniors and you saw them on television, you're like, oh my God, look at these guys. I mean, Bure, of course, with the speed, McGillney with the hands, Fedorov with the everything. Like, it was just, you couldn't believe it. And it was, you know, jarring just how good they were at 18, 19 years old.
Artemi Panarin.
Panarin had a little bit of a, yeah, for sure. Anyways, so Michkov, expect that he's going to be fun. Earlier in the summer, you may remember, there were widespread reports that Sidney Crosby had agreed to or was on the verge of agreeing to a contract extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then nothing was announced, and the conversation around it sort of petered out. And lo and behold, Sidney Crosby is a week away from reporting to less than that Penguins training camp, entering the final year of his contract. Now, this from the media, NHL Player Media Tour in Vegas. Matt Larkin doing the reporting here for DFO. Sidney Crosby is, quote, optimistic about a contract extension before the start of the season. He doesn't know how many years he has left, but feels as passionate going into training camp as he did in year one. Is your antenna up on this one at all?
Not yet. No. I think there's, you know, much like Draisaitl, and Draisaitl happened earlier than this, but I think when you got the long relationship with a player, I don't think you necessarily. I think the Penguins feel like, by virtue of being the Penguins, they've still got leverage on Sidney. They know Sidney doesn't really want to move.
I would not overplay that hand.
No, you don't want. You don't
I would
ever
not
take it for
overplay that
granted.
hand. And of course, the other thing there is, you're probably looking at some lean years here in Pittsburgh. Is that how you want to go out as a player? Like, I put it this way, I don't know him. I mean, I've asked him questions and been in scrums with him, but I don't pretend to know him. That said, I would bet that Sidney Crosby's competitiveness is stronger than his loyalty to Pittsburgh.
I would have thought that too, and that's why I've been somewhat critical, because, hey, I fully expect Sidney Crosby to be a Pittsburgh Penguin. I think that's how this story is going to end. But all the writing is on the wall here. Like, the Penguins do not appear to be contending in the next 3 years.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. He could sign an extension with Pittsburgh and then get traded.
And there's that path too, apparently.
Right.
But I wouldn't think that his legacy is sullied if Sidney Crosby moves on at this point. He's given the city cups, multiple cups. So
yeah, and
I don't get it.
The fact of the matter is, the Penguins already have a Hall of Fame legacy player who was only a Penguin in Mario Lemieux.
And there's always
Gretzky played for 4 teams. Mario played for 1.
You know, ex-players will always say, well, they're humans. They love where they live. They love the community. And to that point, I would say, by all means, absolutely within their right. No one's saying they can't. They're not allowed. They're allowed to have that override everything. But speaking from a guy that left my home sweet home to chase a job, I mean, when I moved to Toronto, I wasn't thinking I'm going to spend the rest of my life in Toronto. I moved to Toronto thinking I'm going to work there for 3 years, see what it does for my career.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, if I'm Sidney Crosby, yeah, I really love Pittsburgh. I want to spend the rest of my life in Pittsburgh, but I'm going to go work somewhere else for a couple of years, see how that goes. He's Sidney freaking Crosby. He can dictate wherever he goes.
The fact of the matter is,
however long he wants.
Even at that level, it is more common to find players with multiple teams than with just one team. We mentioned Gretzky.
Yeah.
Bobby Orr played for the Blackhawks after the Bruins. Gordie Howe.
Ray Bourque
played for the Hartford Whalers after the Red Wings. Ray Bourque. Paul Coffey. Go
Mark
down
Messier.
the list.
Yeah. Multiple teams.
Of great NHL players.
Jaromir Jagr bouncing around.
Yeah.
So it's, there's a little bit of a Canadiana thing to it. The Canadian players tend to want to nest a little bit. We've talked about Swedish players liking to nest as well. But I don't get it.
But
and
even
again,
the Swedish players who like to nest, Marcus Naslund went on to be a Ranger. Daniel Alfredsson went on to be a Red Wing. Matt Sundin went on to be a Vancouver Canuck.
and do me a favor.
Do you remember Peter Forsberg as a Nashville Predator, Blake? It happened.
Do me a favor, Lunatic Fringe. Don't be like, they're allowed to do it. Yes, they are. No one's saying they're not allowed. I'm just saying I don't understand. I can't get in the headspace of being them and saying, no, I'm just going to stay here. And no, I'll be happy to make the second round, which would sort of be where this team is at, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Lucky to make the second round. I can't get in that headspace.
Yeah. And Blake, honestly, and I know you poo-poo me every time I bring this up.
I'll be ready to do it again.
Well, is he a Vancouver Canuck one day? The city of his golden moment with a management group and a head coach that is dearly beloved. And the potential to take a Canadian city over the top and win that franchise's first cup. There is a hell of a sales pitch that this franchise can make for Sidney Crosby if he gets to free agency or if he's available in trade one day. His favorite team growing up, the Montreal Canadiens. Probably a year or two away. Could he go in there and be the piece that drives the Canadiens back to Stanley Cup contention?
Wonderful.
His agent is in Los Angeles with the Kings. That's where Gretzky wound up. There are a lot of opportunities in Los Angeles. So I wonder about that one as well. There's a few other stops around the NHL that I look at and go, could I see Sidney in that jersey? Do things about that team, city, market, competitive cycle make sense? And I come to the conclusion, yeah. And so I think Sidney's a pretty pensive guy. And certainly his agent, Pat Brisson, would know. I do wonder whether that the thoughts have crossed their mind, whether he's done any sort of consideration or calculation about what life after Pittsburgh would look like, if there is a hockey life after Pittsburgh for the great number 87.
I see a young Dennis Quaid playing Sidney Crosby in this movie of yours.
Young Dennis Quaid. The guy's like 70.
I said a young Dennis Quaid.
Young?
Yeah.
You think they look alike?
No, I'm just saying he played the old guy in the baseball movie. So,
the rookie.
Yeah.
There was a book written about Sidney once, the rookie.
I don't see it. I just.
You don't see anywhere, or you just don't see here?
Anywhere. I think he's going to retire at Pittsburgh Penguin. It's not
that would be disappointing.
It would be.
Because this is truly
so
one of the great players in the history of the league. He is arguably on on the NHL's Mount Rushmore, and I think it would be awfully sad to see him peter out with a franchise that is petering out and below the playoff bar and not playing in the spring.
Ryan on YouTube sitting, going anywhere. He's doing what Super Mario did before him, and he's retiring a pen. I agree with you here. He followed up, though, and I don't agree with this one. He doesn't need to do anything else. Well, you're right. He doesn't need to do anything, but he
sure doesn't.
But he wants to do something else. Rest assured, Ryan. Like he wants to
I don't
win.
think Sidney Crosby's done winning.
No.
Is my point. Like, look at the season he had last year. I mean, this guy's still a monster into his late 30s.
Now here's where it gets complicated is he can still do it. He proved it. Does he still think that he can do it so well that he can actually put this team on his back and singularly bring them to the Stanley Cup again?
One could quibble with your word singular, but 94 points, 42 goals last year, played all 82 for the second straight year.
So in his mind, he still got everything he's ever had.
That is still a number one center in the NHL. He's 37 years old.
Top 10 player in the NHL.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. Because he's responsible defensively too. Totality of the player, he's a top 10 player in the league. You could make the argument he's higher than that. Like
he's going to crest
6 to 8.
1,600 points in the first couple weeks, maybe in the first game of the season.
Yeah.
He's going to crest 1,300 games this year, provided he stays healthy.
Yeah, he's not in the Barca Lounger.
No, he isn't anywhere close to that.
No.
So, if we were talking about a diminished player, I could see the Pittsburgh thing, Blake. But we're still talking about a frontline NHL player. Do you want to waste that with a franchise that isn't going to be cup competitive over the next couple
like any
years?
GM, though,
because
Matt,
here's the thing: at 39, at 40, you can't count on that.
But
the clock is ticking here rapidly.
Like any GM or president or particularly owners look at their own team. Their own team is always better than they actually are. And so Sidney, does he always look at this squad and go, no, I can take this team. I can get them to the cup final.
And I would, you're right about they always have an inflated opinion of the team they play on. But I think there's also now not just a molehill, but a mountain of evidence that this team isn't good enough, Blake. Like we are talking about, first of all, they've missed the playoffs in the last 2 years. They have not won a playoff round since 2018. And that was a first round series against Philadelphia before they bowed in round 2 to Washington. That was the year after they were defending their second title defense, right? Because they won the back-to-back cups. And then they come back that year. They lose to Washington, their rivals, right? In the second round. They have not won a playoff series yet since. They have lost 4 consecutive first rounds, including the qualifying round in the bubble. They have 6 playoff victories in the last 6 years.
And as Grim Studio points out too, you're drawing up all these fantastical scenarios of the Canucks or the Canadians.
I don't think it's that fantastic.
You forgot about with the other one that's actually maybe more obvious than those two.
Which one?
His bestie, Nathan McKinnon.
Colorado. Yep. No, that's another one too. That's absolutely another one as well.
Thick as thieves. 2 of them would be something.
Cole
else.
Harbor, the Nova Scotia version, getting together.
Yeah.
So, anyways, look, for all we know, you're going to get an announcement later today. The Pittsburgh Penguins have re-signed Sidney Crosby to a 5-year deal or a 4-year deal, wherever the term is going to be. But I think it's an interesting topic to bat around for hockey fans here now, as Sidney enters the twilight after a magnificent career and keeping up a pace that very few have been able to keep up, to be that great a player still at this stage of the game when you're so deep into your career. Let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta Bar. Greta, fantastic spot to catch a game throughout the season. Quick walk to Rinker Stadium. Go-to spot for food, drinks, and fun before and after the game. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. Check out that arcade, and there's going to be a lot of people downtown this weekend going to the games. We'll have we're going to have Patrick Johnson here coming up from the province and Post Media on a bunch of Vancouver Canucks related topics. And then Stephen Ellis of the Daily Faceoff, their prospect writer. We're going to talk Lecker-Mackey, Wielander with him, as well as young stars a little bit. So that's coming up on the program. Time for our Bet365 bets of the day, Blake Price. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud sponsors of Sekeres and Price. Delighted to have them aboard. I continue to look at the NHL's future, the NHL future markets, where you can predict the division that wins the Stanley Cup. The Pacific is the third choice here.
Is it really?
Well, and look, I understand it's weak at the bottom.
Yeah, but that's what
but
it's
you
about.
Get Edmonton, you get Vancouver, you get Vegas, maybe even LA if they have a special season. But at worst case, you got 3 live contenders there.
Yeah.
And you get them all at plus 280.
Yeah, I like it. Like it a lot. Looking at the Thursday nighter, who'd have thought you'd see this? But talks about maybe the receiving core here. Josh Allen and Tua Tagovailoa on the Thursday nighter. Tagovailoa's over/under for passing yards is way higher than Josh Allen's.
Well, Josh was running. Yeah.
Like, who'd have thought that?
Well, the receiving group in
That's it.
Buffalo
That's
is
it.
not great anymore. The receiving group in Miami is extraordinary. I know Buffalo wants to get back to running the football a little bit. And of course, Allen likes to run the ball, particularly early in the season when the body's still feeling fresh. So, yeah, I see the pathway.
I think the Fish are a little inspired by the Hill incident as well. So I'm going to take the over for Tua, despite the lofty number of 270.5. I'll take Tua on the over.
You know what else I like about that? Buffalo had those two safeties, Hyde and Poyer, for years, and they turned them both over. Is Milano the linebacker playing? Because if not, Buffalo, I think, is susceptible to the pass. I like that. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Patrick Johnston coming up next.
Normally when we talk about Greta Bar YVR, we're telling you make it a game night at Greta, and we're talking about hockey. Of course, we're not quite yet at hockey season, but game night can mean whatever it means, and that could mean soccer or football game to watch on the screen or your own games, because the arcade is half the fun at Greta Bar YVR. Make it your game night at 50 West Cordova. And of course, great food and drink specials, and you can also make it a late game night as they're open late every single night. So make it a late game night, your game night at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova.
Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center, and our next guest is a presentation of Mr. Lube.
The Wipers event is on now. Have you been there?
It's Change Your Oil, Change Your Wipers event, Blake Price. It's on now. Visit MrLube.com. Download your coupon for a free pair of Goodyear hybrid wiper blades with any oil change, only for a limited time at Mr. Lube. 18 locations in the Lower Mainland. In fact, I was at the Arbutus Street location last month.
Did you see that teamwork, PJ? Did you see that teamwork? See how the winger picks up the little fumble from the center? Yeah.
I'm just wondering what the bear situation is at Mr. Lube, since the previous sponsor had a lot of bear issues.
Don't even get me started with the Bears. They ransacked my garbage this morning on garbage day.
And as for the winger thing, I felt like Elias Pettersson a whole lot here.
Woo! Wow, getting called Ilya Mikheyev to his face.
Wow,
you take that, Blake?
I thought he meant underachieving centers. I thought that's what he was referring to.
Oh, here we go.
It's hockey season.
It is hockey season. So let me just ask this. Does all of this stuff with Pettersson and Demko amount to they're just going to have to play through knee bobos? Like, is Demko have an injury here, or does he just have like what Elias has, inflammation, tendonitis, discomfort, and he's just going to have to push through? Is that your understanding at this stage of the game?
Well,
with the goaltender,
as I wrote in the end, does he show up on Thursday next week? And if he shows up on Thursday, listen, everything, all the clues, all the signs have been there that he had, he's not going to be there Thursday, or at least if he's there Thursday, he's not ready to go to be a full participant. Listen, you never, as I've said many times on this program, you never say never in hockey until it's happened or it hasn't happened.
Do you hold out is there a non-zero chance he starts training camp on time?
I mean, nothing is 100%. I don't think. Listen. Whoever's doing social media, do not turn this into me saying he's going to be there.
No,
I was pretty certain last spring. I would just like to remind everyone, I was pretty certain last spring that Phil Kessel was not going to be a Vancouver Canuck. I was pretty much on an island on that one. I was comfortable in that
space.
Position.
Yes.
I have no idea. I mostly think that what we've heard is the truth. And, like I talked to Jim Rutherford last week, and he noted, no, we don't want to go into LTIR. Very aware, of what the topics are right now, but being very cautious. Listen, they haven't had their physical back. We can't say anything until they're officially with us. So there we go. Certainly I haven't heard anything that goes against everything that's been reported elsewhere, which would be different from what I heard with Kessel, for instance.
So are you encouraged or discouraged by what Friedman had to say in that there is no surgical fix here? It's just something he's going to have to learn to play through.
I don't know. I mean, if it's a knee issue, if it's a meniscus thing, if it's a case of a knee that now is, not as functional as it once was, I'm just speculating, to be clear. Then yeah, I mean, that's just reality. That's the only thing I can kind of guess from a statement like that, is that you're just dealing with you're never 100%. Again, once you get hurt, you're never 100%. The line from Presbalewski in The Wire being, no one wins, one team just loses more slowly, applies here. That's life, that you're an athlete and you are never going to be young again. And that's just the simple truth. And you have to find ways going forward.
So the goalies,
very wishy-washy hit here from Johnston. Huh?
It's
Maybe
the
he
cone
does
of
have some
silence.
new Goodyear hybrid wiper blades. He dropped an "I don't know" on us, Blake.
That's honesty. That's honesty.
If you're new to punditry, you can drop an "I don't know."
Well, you talk to people.
As vested a guy as he is and drop an "I don't know" on us. Oh.
I don't, because I ask people who might know, and they either say I don't know or it's not hard to say. That's where we are, which is clearly what's been going on with everybody. So it's just kind of trying to stack up all the sticks and make them stick together. And
so that means that
like a house.
We're looking at Shelovs, Patera, and Talapila as the.
At this point, I mean, listen,
Wow.
The fact that they did approach Kevin Lankinen is clear. You don't approach a free agent goalie if you don't have questions about what's going on.
Right. And
the fact that, as I wrote, my stories up this morning at province.com, as I wrote this morning, you don't go say we don't want to go into LTIR without also implying we'd rather not sign a contract. But the fact that is the matter is the contract, Kevin Lankinen, maybe someone will show up on a PTO in the next week.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it's pretty clear that has been a discussion. And why would you bring another goalie in if you weren't concerned about your number one?
Mm-hmm. Now, we know Thatcher has been doing stuff.
Yes. I've heard he's on the ice.
We get word, like, our friends are some of the marshals and regular players at Northlands, every time he shows up there to play golf, let us know.
Yeah.
And yet they held him out of the Milford, huh?
I guess. I mean, or he was at the Gaudreau service.
Oh. Were they tight? Did you know?
Someone had suggested. I honestly didn't. I didn't. That was a suggestion to me, but it was not something I ran down.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, there are many reasons why. Not everybody plays golf You're right. Most people do. Most people show up. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back in the day, it was mandatory. Like, even if you weren't playing golf, you showed up as a player to shake hands. And
things ain't like they used to be, Matt.
Right. In many ways.
Nobody wants to hear about our problems. No, listen, I can confirm what's been reported, that he's been on the ice. I don't know if he's been taking shots, but certainly he has been working his way back to being on, preparing for the season.
Okay.
So listen, I cannot say definitively whether he will be on the ice next Thursday, whether he will take shot. But it's clear to me that he is making progress, that there is some good news there. And what the timeline is, we're still a month out from the beginning of the regular season. Is there enough time there for ready for the regular season? I guess we'll see. We'll know more on Thursday.
And to the best of your knowledge, Artie is full go. Will be able to participate from the start of training camp.
Yeah, which I think was a curious one. The Latvians sort of telling us what they could, and which was most of the story. And the Canucks choosing to remain mum on it.
But them being the drivers of it, the Canucks being the drivers of that, do you think, or the Latvians just being overly cautious?
I think their silence spoke volumes there. I would bet.
listen, in the end, the point was he was practicing really hard this summer. The Latvian said he's dealing with a knee inflammation. The decision was made that he shouldn't play for the good of the totality of his season. He needed to take a step back, but that he will be ready to go for the beginning of the season. Now, the thing that I wasn't clear on, because I don't speak Latvian and I wasn't able to get a hold of anybody, was did they mean training camp or the regular season? Either way, it seems pretty clear. I mean, he's been on the ice. He was on the ice last week at UBC with his teammates. Declined to speak for, I get it. But yeah, he was on the ice. So taking shots and doing all the stuff. So I don't think there's any real anxiety at this point about him. Other than he trained too hard, which I suppose is not bad. But yeah, I mean, it's a demanding position. It's a hard position. Ian Clark pushes his goalies hard, and they've been successful because of it. Let's be clear on that, because there's been some notion, look how the risk he takes. Well, look how good his goalies
Yeah, no,
been,
exactly.
right?
No, quite
so,
right. Like, I got no problem with hard driving coaches.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, it's a bit of a lost art these days. But a great coach pushes you beyond what you anticipate are your boundaries, right? Pushes you out of your comfort zone and ultimately makes you better. And I mean, Clark has unquestionably done that.
And a topic that Rick Talk and I have talked about, like that the coach's job is to help the player find their way to a place they didn't know they could get to. They didn't even know existed in a lot of cases, right? And that's the challenge. And it's that ability to sustain, and that applies to goalies as much as it applies to forwards.
As long as they remember,
that should be crystal is that Demko and Clark are copacetic. They are absolutely. So
Demko went to bat. Let's not forget, Demko went to bat to get Ian Clark his contract.
That's right. That's right.
In the COVID season when everything was going wrong.
Right. So this is, whatever happened here with the goaltending coaching change and all that, that was of management's making. Yes. That was not driven by Thatcher Demko or.
The one thing that hard driving coaches lose sight of, though, is that they are made of the same material as you and I, that they do not possess titanium limbs, and they are going to suffer the rigmaroles of all the work that they do put in. And because they don't put in that work, they're not the ones doing the drills that they are ordering. I think sometimes that gets lost, and that's why injuries do occur. So there is a fine line to be walked. But
I don't know, Blake, you should see Rick Talkett in a tight fitted shirt. That man may be made of titanium.
Yeah, and Rod Brindamore alike.
Rod Brindamore especially. As someone who's taken a wedding photo with Rod Brindamore, I could confirm
wow,
he may be made of titanium.
Prospects week, only one of the top two prospects for the Vancouver Canucks is, of course, up at Young Stars in Jonathan Lekromacki. But our poll question today asking, if it's a season similar enough to last year for the Vancouver Canucks, knowing all the delicate contract situations of these big-time players, 2 years left of Demko, et cetera, do they owe it to themselves to entertain trading one of Tom Wielander or Jonathan Lekromacki?
We're already there.
It's prospects. Do you trade one of your top two prospects?
If you are in an if you were in a position as strong as you were last year, I think you entertain that. I think it's if it means listen, they want part of the story of this LTIR not wanting to be an LTIR is because they want to accrue cap space that they want to use later in the season, so they can add someone like last year's hot prize Jake Gensel, right? Or failing that, Tyler Toffoli, or failing that, like Chris Tanev didn't happen because they didn't have enough cap space. It was on the verge of happening. Like when they made the Kuzmenko trade, I had someone saying the Tanev thing might happen. But I was sitting there going, well, they're going to have to make then in the end, they couldn't make it work because of the cap situation. So listen, we know what they want. I mean, when Alvin, as I revealed on this program, when Alvin confirmed to me that he had been trying to get rid of Pullman's deal to clear off that cap, it was clear what they wanted to do, that they would like to be big game players. And to be a big game player, you're going to have to be willing to move something big. And sure, if they find themselves in a position where similar to where they were last year, where they're one of the top teams in the league on record, and they need to build themselves, add that extra piece that will help them get beyond the second round, get past the Oilers, get past the Vegas, whoever else you're running into in the Western Conference. Yeah, of course, one of those guys is going to probably have to be somebody you consider letting go.
And as much as you want to say, you got to save the defenseman, the defenseman's also the more valuable guy. So depending on who the target is.
Good answer.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I'm improving. See?
Getting a lot better here.
From I don't know
Hey,
to hot takes.
If we get this hit to 25 minutes, he's going to be sensational. Hughes says 20. DeBrus says 25 to 35. No, they spoke it. You know,
I know.
They set the goals and they spoke it publicly, and I applaud them. And we had Corrado on yesterday. You said he loved the confidence.
Yes.
Of that. But what do you make? Because as you know,
there's only
now
so
that
many
those
goals.
totals are out there, everyone will be
counting,
keeping track at home.
J-Pat. I mean, this is J-Pat's thing, right? Like, Brock. Brock won't play that game anymore.
No.
But listen, yes, I love the bravado. I love the confidence. I did sit back and okay, wait, how many goals do they think are in these games? Because I also found myself thinking a little bit way back to Tyler Dello taking down, I can't remember who it was in Edmonton, predicting that the Oilers would have 9 guys with more than 40 or 50 points and 10 guys, there's only so many goals to get scored. I hope for the Canucks' sake that yes, Jake DeBrus has an outstanding season, because listen, that was an issue that Ilya Mikheyev couldn't finish, that PD needed a winger. PD could only do so much. I mean, listen, some of it was on him, sure, but some of it didn't help. You look at Game 7, what was I think back to that end of season press conference. I asked Rick talking about, is there anything, that you think back, you wish was different? And I was kind of thinking about coaching, but he went and go, oh man, if Mikheyev had only scored. And he wasn't throwing Mikheyev under the bus, but he couldn't help but think, if that puck goes in, that puck gets buried, it's a totally different game. And they're still maybe playing. And, that's why you need DeBrus. You need him to score goals. Did Ilya Mikheyev miss out on, he had 11, he had 10 goals in whatever it was at Christmas, and then he just never scored again. So he could have had 20 goals. So you're asking DeBrus to score the 10 to 15 goals that Mikheyev missed out on. Sure, that's easy. And then Hughes, he's going to keep trying to score. He's going to keep trying to score. If the Canucks can get 20 more goals out of this lineup, amazing. If 20 goals shift from someone else, well, that's a different story. Let's not forget that a huge issue coming down the stretch and into the playoffs was the Canucks had become too defensive. They weren't taking enough risks. And that's something the coach himself acknowledged, saying, I'm going to have to think about this differently. We have to think about how our system works. They defended well. They broke the puck out well, but they weren't in the end creating enough. And so when the shooting percentage bubble burst, how do you like that alliteration? When the shooting percentage bubble burst, there was nothing there. They weren't creating enough. And that was another reason why they lost to the Oilers.
It's a fairly skilled team on the forward lines. Do you think early season they have a chance to? And the start last year of the Oilers disproves this, because they were still as skilled as they ever were and they could not win.
Right.
But overall, I would think a skilled team in the loosey-goosey October-November part of the schedule, shouldn't skill just win? Shouldn't you score goals and win those games if you are just more skilled?
Well, certainly that was the theory last year, part of the story. They had this insane shooting percentage.
Yeah.
Unprecedented. Let's not forget, we're not even talking about PDO. We're just talking about shooting percentage.
Yeah.
Unprecedented success putting the puck in the net. And some of that was luck. Some of that was the way they were playing. And some of that was, like what you just said, was the early season when teams are still sorting themselves out. This is the sort of reality of why, training camps are so short now, right? Preseason is let's get right at it. And teams are building these complicated systems. And the comparison made last fall, in his first fall with the team by Rick Tocchet, was learning the football playbook, right? You don't just start at the back. It's built. You build stuff as the season goes along. And that's true for all teams, that what they're trying to do defensively is evolving, it's improving, it's getting better as the season progresses. And so, you're exactly right, Blake. That's what the Canucks, that's the lesson that they were struggling to learn in previous seasons when they had those terrible starts. They would fall behind the 8 ball, and they were the teams that were getting used and abused because they couldn't figure out their defense and they couldn't score. And last year was the opposite. They were playing reasonably well defensively not right off the bat, but they figured it out pretty quick. Don't forget, Rick Tocchet did have to get on his team a little bit and get them to bear down, and they found their way. And, in the second half, they were one of the best defensive teams in the NHL. Well, in the first half, they were one of the best offensive. They outscored a lot of their problems, and they fixed their problems along the way. That's a lesson. That's what they need to do again this year. It's pretty simple. but also complicated.
Another good answer. Boy, we've gone from I don't know to master class
Well,
in the
it's
span
warming
of 10,
up,
12 minutes here. Yes, absolutely. Well done.
Do we count this as his first hit of the season? Is this his preseason?
Well, he was with us all summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just an ongoing. It's a continuum.
Well,
with
we
PJ.
were off. What, last week we were off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm happy to be here.
So are we.
I want to switch gears here, and not an easy turn. We're having fun, but boy, you're writing a really heavy story here today about a former National Hockey Leaguer who had been living in our community. Tell us about Stephen Pete for those who don't know.
Well, Stephen Pete was had a not a long run, but was an NHL enforcer about 20 years ago. He and I are about the same age, in his 20s, and but stories started popping up, I guess 10 years ago, that he'd been struggling a lot with mental health. Was unhoused, had been dealing with addiction, all sort of the worst things that we can imagine to go in our lives. And the large part of the story was soon a guy that had taken a lot of blows to his head. And there were a number of stories written about that, and it's been confirmed he's died at 44. Talking to Corey Hirsch knew him a little bit because they played together in Washington a little bit, and a guy that you obviously Corey's a big mental health advocate, and so always wants to talk about a game that he loves, a game that did so much for him, but a game that has caused a lot of pain and suffering for a lot of people. And so, just sort of while we're talking here, I'm still sort of in the middle of assembling the story, but trying to understand, this is a guy that, everyone deserves to be remembered. And a guy that sadly is in the middle of an ongoing story. There's going to be more about this. I mean, there's you just do a short list of players who have passed away this year, and Pete's one of them. Chris Simon, Sergei Berezin, Blaine Locker, guys that played in the NHL. Not all those guys were tough guys. There's a sad sort of common thread of personal health to all of these stories, and struggles after their playing career. And some of that may be unsolvable, but there is a question of support and how do people transition into regular life. And Corey noted to me, he said, listen, all his buddies are sort of starting to think about retirement. His buddies who didn't play hockey, they had a long career working, they saved their money. Guys who played, they get a bit of a pension. Corey's got a pension, but it's like the rest of us. He doesn't, if he really wants his full pension, he's got to wait till he's 65, and he's still in his early 50s. He's got to figure out how he bridges to that. And when you played hockey, you often don't know anything else. And Corey is one of the lucky ones in that he's found his way to being a mental health advocate and has worked a little bit as a coach and a broadcaster. But a guy like Stephen Pete, who is, had a simple role on the team and has clearly struggled in his post hockey life. And there's a lot to be discussed there, both a personal level and a larger scale.
I got to say, I think it's one thing that leagues and players associations, players unions could get together and do more of, and that is take care of past players, players who didn't play in eras where when you made the team, you're instantly in the high six figures or seven figures beyond, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The bottom line now is you do not have to play an awfully long time in any of the big four North American sports leagues to be financially set for life. And when you go back 30 years, depends on the sport a little bit, but 20, 30, 40 years, you have cohorts of past players for whom that was completely the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Like you had to play a long time
to
be financially set for life.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that leagues and unions could do a little bit more for those players, because effectively they help build the leagues and the teams and the unions that now exist today and deliver such riches to everybody
Something
involved.
to watch too, guys, is the latest date for all of these players that keep passing away. What's the latest season that they played, and honestly, what's their starting date too? And it's going to be disconcerting as we sort of graduate out of the old timey era of fighting.
Mm.
Are we still going to see these sorts of tragic cases here just from regular old hockey? What we figure now is just regular hockey, the odd fight here and there. But it feels like the sport's in a pretty decent spot, not a ton of fighting every now and then. Like, it doesn't seem like fighting is prevalent. But are we still going to see these brain injuries, you know?
Two things stand out. One, hockey, and one is a different sport. But the hockey one, to your point, Blake, I mean, in many ways, if you think about it, you think about way junior hockey, the dub in the late 80s, right? When Corey, for instance, hockey was playing, and how truly wild hockey
Very little
was.
hockey, mostly fighting.
Right.
Yes.
And those guys, a lot of those guys translate into the NHL, right? And so through the 90s into the early 2000s, you have a lot of those types of guys, right? So there's a sort of guys that are, in their mid 50s now. And then that carries on, there's sort of, like I said, Steve and Pete were the same age, carries on, until about, 15 years ago, right? So there's sort of a 20-year window of players that we're dealing with, getting punched in the head, and they're probably going to be the lead item. But it now evolves. I mean, Greg Johnson, you can add Greg Johnson to this list, who's, his family revealing earlier this summer that after they had donated his brain to science and the brain was analyzed and he had CTE. And there's a guy who didn't fight. And Sergei Berezin, I mean, we don't know what happened with Sergei Berezin, but the skill player who clearly struggled in his post-hockey career. But what I found myself thinking also is rugby. Rugby is now dealing with the effects of what's become a very heavy contact, obviously minimal padding, all about your body. And, since it turned professional almost 30 years ago, the sort of consequences of heavier body size, heavier players smacking each other, not punching each other, but tackling each other hard. And, they're dealing with heightened issues of things like CTE, early onset dementia, other brain issues, like a much higher rate of what we call ALS in North America, and they call NMD, motor neuron disease. Players suffering debilitating neurological illnesses because of contact. And so I mean that is a very similar story. And like you said, Blake, where is this going to evolve? We're moving out of the enforcer era. Now we're just moving into this sort of this high speed era, but there's still head contact. I mean, obviously, I would say credit to most sort of levels of hockey trying to take concussions more seriously. Teams don't rush players back. They try, we don't hear about guys being sent out, despite not knowing where they are. The stories of Gino Ojic. I mean, there's a story from Gino after he retired from about 10 years ago where he told an audience that basically he realized he'd become addicted to getting punched in the head. That's a very extreme case, but there's an adrenaline rush that a lot of these guys get from playing hockey, from skating hard, from the physical parts of the game. And there's still going to be guys that are putting their heads on the line. And you hope that what guys like Steve and Pete have gone through becomes less and less of a thing. But we would be unwise to assume that's going to be the case.
Yeah, Stephen Pete, born in Princeton, British Columbia, played for the Langley Thunder of the BCJHL for a couple of seasons before ultimately a second-round pick, 32nd overall, and gets to the National Hockey League and plays 130 games with the Washington Capitals. Gone at age 44, and we express our sympathies, condolences to his friends and families. We'll read the story. We'll have you back next week. Thanks for this, Peach.
Take care, guys.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Sekeres and Price from the historic Wall Center, and we welcome to the program for a first time Stephen Ellis, the prospect analyst for the Daily Faceoff. It is, of course, prospect season with all these rookie camps getting underway on the weekend. We'll be in Penticton, the South Okanagan Event Center, to watch the Canucks, Flames, Oilers, and Jets. Stephen, thanks for the time. Appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for having me.
You recently published a list of the top 75 affiliated prospects in the National Hockey League. So everyone who's been drafted, and a couple of Vancouver Canucks made the list. First, tell us about Jonathan Lekkerimäki, where you had him on your list, what you sort of envision as an NHL player, because he'll be the star of the show here in Penticton.
Yeah, I had him at number 28 on my list, which was a big move up from 64 the previous year. I think the big thing for him was he needed to show that confidence. I know that draft plus 1 year was not very good. He kind of showed up in the playoffs, and that was a good sign of what was to come. And then getting to see him play such a big role this year in Sweden, I think was really exciting. And really smart player, great shot. I think that's the thing, obviously, everyone looks at. You know, look at the World Junior Championship and how good he was with the puck. It just seemed like anytime he touched it, it went in, and there's a reason he's an MVP for that. But I think, the just confidence was the thing I was looking for there, because when you get a guy who produces a ton of points moving up, and then all of a sudden he's not producing points, that could be very difficult on a young player who's used to dominating. And we see that with so many players. That's not an isolated issue. But I think the one thing for him was he looked really comfortable as the season wore on, and you saw a guy who wanted the puck as much as possible. So I think he was actually one of the more improved prospects in the NHL because of that. And I think I'm really excited to kind of see him become a potential top 6 player for the Canucks.
He faces the music this year, though, with the jump to the AHL. It's another jump on a full-time basis. I'm sure when you've done these in the past, that's where rubber hits the road. It's one thing to make the jump to the SHL, but you come to the AHL and the confines get a little smaller. I'm sure this is where it really gets interesting for you.
Yeah, I guess the one thing you see specifically in the SHL is that's a league that values winning and not development. And we've seen so many good young players. Lucas Raymond is a perfect example of a guy who was way better in the NHL than he ever was in the SHL. And that's because he got those opportunities to play. The team values something like that. And with Lekaramaki going to Abbotsford, like, the whole idea is to develop prospects. So they're going to give him every opportunity to play right away and play a lot. And that's important. So yeah, going to the AHL, a new situation for him, smaller ice, place he's not very familiar with. It's going to be a learning experience, but that's what you're looking for a young guy like this, getting that opportunity to get adjusted to North America.
What would a step-up season look like for Lekaramaki, Stephen? What would you want to see in a best-case scenario for him and his development this year?
I want to see him get 15 goals, 40-ish points, something like that. Just kind of show that he can continue putting up points on the board. I want to see him continue to work on his defensive game, making sure he's always moving around there, always covering somebody. And I think that this is a situation here where he's going to have plenty of opportunities to play a lot of minutes, and getting that ice time and making sure he can make mistakes without getting penalized is going to be very valuable.
He's not the biggest guy either. He has to survive the AHL in order to score those goals and get those points. I first of all like the number, because we have to moderate people's expectations. He's a nice prospect, but he's not a blue chip or top 5 pick. So 15 goals in the AHL would be okay. But he's got to survive, and I'm sure that's another factor that weighs in when you look in. No pun intended here, when you look at these European prospects that come over, is how many of them have filled out. Not all of them are David Reinbacher.
Yeah, I think this is obviously, we're going to have to see what happens when we do see him in game action. But, the one thing that a lot of, agents are making sure their players are doing when they're coming over from Europe is spending a lot of time in the weight room. And that's another thing, like with college players, where you want those guys going out there and spending as much time just bulking up and getting as strong as possible. But we have seen a shift in the last couple of years where European players are putting a bit more emphasis on getting stronger, becoming more physical, because the competition continues to get better as more ex-NHL players go over there and start to penalize you when you're not playing a more physical game. So I think, I wouldn't call him a soft player by any means, but I think you got to hope that this summer he's been spending a lot of time getting stronger.
Tom Wielander is the other Canuck prospect to make your list. Stephen, tell us where you had him and what you think of the player.
Yeah, so I am at number 63. He wasn't on my rankings last year. I think, for me, I was really interested to see how that college commit or move was going to be. And actually, he's been kind of a trailblazer that we've seen a bunch of other Swedish defensemen since then commit to go play in the NCAA. And showing that he was able to make it work at Boston this past year was really impressive. And I love what he does with the puck. He's really skilled there. I think, the first time I saw him play in person was the World Junior A Challenge 2 years ago. And you saw a guy who just wanted the puck on his stick at all times. He was the one controlling the power play, rushing the puck all the time. And it's funny, the picture I actually put of him in my story, I had taken that picture, and I remember the specific play where shorthanded, he went end to end and scored a really nice goal. And that's a guy that just goes out there and does great stuff with the puck. I think, being a bit more aggressive in his own zone would be something I want to see him do. Being a bit quicker at that acceleration, because he's got good top speed, but I want him to start a little quicker with his footwork. But I do like where his game is right now. Like being 63 out of top 75, like that still means you're a pretty good prospect.
And he's still got 1 year at least. Does he have 2 years of school left? What do you think his plans are?
I think that this could be something where he spends one more year and he's going to play a bigger role this year, and then maybe we'll see him go to the AHL. So it's a couple of years from the NHL, but I don't know how many years he's going to want to spend in college.
What would be a good step up season for him, Stephen? Like man the power play, take me through what you want to see this year out of Wheelander.
With no Lane Hudson, I think he's going to get a lot more opportunities to be that power play dynamo, go out there. I expect he's going to get probably over 30 points. I'd love to see him double his goal count because he's got a good shot. He knows how to use it. He only had 4 goals last year. I could see him get 8 or 9. I think with Boston University, they're not going to have as many, weapons to go out there and score goals. Like they're not going to have Macklin Celebrini, but they're going to have Cole Eiserman. So he is going to have a pretty good goal scorer to pass to, and I think that's going to make that really fun in the power play. So if he's take that number 1 role, that would be a really good sign.
He's going to have to fire those long passes down to Cole Eiserman, who I imagine will be hanging out by the opponent's blue line.
That's usually where he is. Did anybody else tease you? I know no honorable mentions even went to Vancouver Canucks. Did anything with a Canucks logo cross your desk beside these 2 names?
No, not really. I did put Artur Silovs in my top 10 for goalies. So he is there. But the thing about the Canucks is they have a pretty decent pool. They're kind of they're closer to mid pack than the bottom. I'm probably a little higher on them than a lot of other people, and it's because they have a lot of guys out there that will work really hard. Like Archdeep Baines, obviously, is a good example of someone like that. And I think I'm really still hoping Arttu Räty pays off. We'll see, but it's a good, not spectacular pool.
Yes, yeah.
Hey, Stephen, they seemingly have taken the tact here, this Canucks management group with Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, and we've discussed this with other folks as well around draft time, that there's just not a whole lot of value to draft picks other than the first 2 rounds. That once you get out of that top 60 range, you're in such a crapshoot that it looks like this franchise is more willing to use those picks as currency to add NHL players as opposed to draft and develop players. We've seen this a few other franchises as well. What do you make of what's going on here with this Canucks front office and sort of the value of mid to late round picks and how that's perceived around the NHL these days?
I think especially the trade deadline, the average fan really overrates the power of a draft pick. Like obviously you still want to go out there and get the best players possible, but we're not seeing it, as many 6th and 7th rounders become these like surprise NHL players because scouting tools are so much better than they ever been. Like obviously you can still go to the games. Teams are investing a lot in that, but the video programs like Instat and Sport Contract and the data you can get from there makes it a lot easier to get a good read on a player. You don't always have to see that player in person. So you kind of have a good idea of what's going to happen. And I think that's why you don't see a ton of busts right at the top of the draft as much anymore, but you're also not seeing, the next Pavel Datsyuk come every couple of years. I will say that the Canucks have drafted a couple good players later in the draft. Anthony Romani is one that I thought was an outstanding pick in that 6th round. I've never actually had to say that defenseman out of Sault Ste. Marie's name, but Kirill
Kudryavtsev.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I do like him. He was a 7th round pick. So I think, you still want to have those picks. I think every team, if I can make a PSA for every team in the draft a goalie every single year. You possibly can. If you given how many goalies do come out of the later rounds, why not? And you might have a really good goalie in the system here. Like, Silovs was a good pickup. Thatcher Demko is supposed to be a starter. But if Demko's ends up getting hurt for a long time, and then you got Silovs, do you feel confident in anyone else in your system? Not really. So you got to go out there and make sure you have as many of those pieces to work with. But the Florida Panthers is a team that seems to draft a goalie every single year, and I hope it pays off for them. But, a 2nd round, 3rd round pick, totally worth trading if it means getting someone that's going to help you immediately, because the odds are, you're not going to find a ton of players that play 200 games in the NHL in any draft. So go and get the help you need if you're in the window to compete. And obviously, you still
We'll see Kudryavtsev and Romani in Penticton
this week. Yeah. Way at the top of your list, you've got future Vancouver Canuck Macklin Celebrini. What are your expectations of Macklin Celebrini? I mean, you call him a prospect here. He's a National Hockey League player. Let's be clear. But
he will move swiftly off this list. By December, he's off this list.
I mean, I was curious, as grotesque as Bedard's junior numbers were, I was curious, like, exactly how quickly it would transfer to the NHL, and it did quite seamlessly. Macklin's a little less highlight reel, but not too much less. I mean, what do you expect for him goals and points wise?
Well, first off, I was at the U18 tournament where Celebrini said that he wanted to see the Canucks go out there and rebuild the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was pretty funny, given what we saw this past season with the Canucks. But when it comes with him, obviously San Jose is not a great team. He's not going to have a ton of guys to play with. The second best player on that team is another centerman and Will Smith. So I think for him, it's going out there and he's not going to go out there and win the scoring race for a rookie. I think he's going to probably get close to 50 points. It is going to be a really good rookie class with him, Smith, Cutter Gauthier, Matvei Michkov. But what he does that a lot of those other guys don't do is he commits to the 200-foot game. He's hitting players. He's actually a very physical player. He's really smart. He outthinks opponents, and he's really wanting to make sure the puck doesn't get anywhere near his net. So he kind of brings that all-around play where if, to bring up the 05-06 draft class. I'm not comparing him to Sidney Crosby, but you see a lot of those same traits there in Celebrini and the way he thinks the game and commits to both ends, where, Crosby's maybe not as offensively gifted. He doesn't have the shot that Alex Ovechkin does, but he's going to go out there and be so effective in every area like Crosby to the point where he's going to make himself so good in areas that are not going to be put on the score sheet. And I think that's going to be overlooked maybe by the average fan, but I do think he's a more well-rounded player than Connor Bedard is. Not as skilled, not as flashy, but he's a more well-rounded player. And a guy like that's going to have no problem adapting to the NHL immediately.
Yeah, as mentioned, last question from me here, Stephen. This is rookie season, prospect season. We have youngsters in Penticton, but there are a bunch of these rookie camps taking place around the continent, around the National Hockey League. What are front offices hoping to achieve? Like, what's a successful rookie camp or prospects tournament in the eyes of an NHL management group, Stephen?
Well, they're looking for a lot of those depth pieces. Like, I'll be in Buffalo for that tournament coming up for the next couple of days. And, the Yuri Kuliks and the Konstantinos, those guys are probably going to be good. But the teams still need to go out there and find those guys who could be a fourth line player, who can be an impact player in the AHL as early as this year. Because I think it gets overlooked how important success in the AHL and ECHL is, because you want your young players to be in a situation where they know how to win. They're part of a winning environment and they're getting those opportunities. So you're looking for guys like these to go out there and really impress. So it's, you're not necessarily going to go out there and win. I remember watching last year in Montreal where Logan Mailloux and David Reinbacher were the two-star players. They didn't play every single game. The whole goal there was to see as many players as possible. If they win, they win. If they lose, it doesn't necessarily matter. It doesn't even necessarily mean your prospect pool is better or worse than another team in that same tournament. It's making sure you've got those pieces that can be impactful and trying to establish those guys early. And a lot of that comes down to guys who could be stepping into the AHL right away. That's important to a lot of teams.
Great stuff. Most insightful. Stephen Ellis, thank you for your time, sir. Enjoy your time in Buffalo, and we'll catch up down the road.
It's really nice to finally see some teams resembling NHL hockey clubs back on the ice.
Resembling.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Sweaters, at the very least.
Yes. Thank you.